Good morning, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, let's get into the news this Thursday morning. Elon Musk is calling for the prosecution of Dr. Anthony Fauci. All his confidence in vaccines is starting to unravel. We're gonna take a look at what's behind both the call for prosecution and the loss of confidence. We're gonna see how they're both intimately related. You may have heard about the tragedy that happened during Monday Night Football game last night. 24-year-old Tamar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills remains in critical condition as of the making of this video, after he collapsed on the field mid-game from what doctors are now calling a cardiac arrest. Now, given that Hamlin is hardly the first young, healthy, physically fit athlete to collapse on field, it didn't take long for people to begin inquiring as to Hamlin's vax status. As it turns out, it does appear Hamlin was vaccinated. Apparently only days ago the Buffalo Bills is a 100% vaccinated team. And already a number of people like former Major League Baseball player Lenny Dykstra are arguing that this, according to them, is yet another athlete-related adverse reaction to the vaccines. Now, of course, in assessing such opinions, it goes without saying, I'm not a doctor. Well, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a doctor. I spend my time in libraries, not laboratories. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a virologist. But what I am interested here is what appears to be the growing public perception that's turning against vaccines in the pharmaceutical companies. And the science is settled disposition and rhetoric. Take a look at this poll. Just came out today, Tuesday, January 3rd. It was conducted by Rasmussen. In a survey of over 1,000 adults, nearly 1 in 328% claimed they know someone they think died from COVID-19 vaccines. It's nearly 30%. 49% of those surveyed believed that it's likely that side effects of COVID-19 vaccines have caused a significant number of unexplained deaths. And not surprisingly, 28% of those believe that it is very likely that's the case. Now, these public perceptions are happening against the background of an increasing number of official and scholarly investigations into possible adverse reactions to the vaccinations, such as the 2021 investigation by Japanese scientists, and the causal relationship between vaccine usage and deaths. The conclusions from that study remain ambiguous. And interestingly, so-called vaccine hesitancy isn't limited to a bunch of, MAGA people in the United States. China is having a huge problem with anti-vaxxers. A number of boosted citizens was dropping dramatically in China. Nearly 90% of the Chinese population is reported to be vaccinated, but the number that have chosen to get the boosters has dropped to half of that. And again, the primary reason cited for not getting the booster is people increasingly don't trust the vaccines. They're increasingly worried about adverse side effects again, for right or wrong. This is the perception. This is what appears to be a growing perception. And then, to top it all off, Elon Musk has entered the fray, calling for the prosecution of Dr. Fauci, and he doubled down on that, right after he fired off that tweet. The retired astronaut and, as it turns out, woke activists, Scott Kelly, took issue with Musk claiming his pronouns were prosecute Fauci, and he tweeted in response, Elon, please don't mock and promote hate toward already marginalized and at risk of violence members of the LGBTQ community. There are real people with real feelings. Furthermore, Dr. Fauci is a dedicated public servant whose sole motivation was saving lives. And Elon just wasn't having any of that. He tweeted back, quote, I strongly disagree forcing your pronouns upon others when they didn't ask, and implicitly ostracizing those who don't is neither good nor kind to anyone. That's for Fauci lied to Congress and funded a gain-of-function research that killed millions of people. Not awesome, in my opinion. So what's going on here? For months, we were told that anti-vaxxers and anti-Fauci voices were just a fringe minority of extremists, nothing more. Now, we got polls that show that nearly 1 in 3 people believe they know someone who died from the vaccine. We got both Japanese researchers looking into adverse reactions as well as the Chinese government facing revolt by nearly half their citizens who are refusing to get boosted. And we've even got the richest man on a planet calling out Fauci on behalf of tens of millions of Twitter users who share the same exact opinion. What is going on here? I believe this call to prosecute Fauci and the erosion in confidence in the vaccines are actually intimately related. What we have to understand is that scholars have noticed a profound sense of alienation opening up between ordinary citizens and our political class. It appears increasingly aloof and removed from those citizens' concerns and values. Now, There are many reasons for this opening alienation, but scholars such as the British sociologist Colin Crouch have observed that globalization by its nature disembeds or dislocates political decision-making away from the local and recalibrates that around a translocal, often transnational group of centralized political elites. And so because of these globalist technological disinvesting processes, the gap between the people and their supposed representatives is in many ways larger than ever. And scholars have noticed that this widening gap between the people and the permanent political class, as it were, has contributed not merely to a sense of political apathy amongst citizens where their participation in voting or in civic affairs has very alarmingly declined over recent years. That's certainly concerning. But apathy is not the only consequence of this alienation. A very definite sense of distrust and disgust has arisen among a significant portion of the population. It's not just on the political right, we're seeing it on the left as well, as Tulsi Gabbard, its recent rejection of the Democratic Party amply demonstrates. And so what we're seeing play out here in both the distrust of vaccines, as well as the disgust in some of our leaders, is in many respects the consequence of this growing alienation between the people and the political class. It's not merely a matter of distrust, because they're so aloof, because they're perceived as dictatorial in that political decision-making is now being imposed from the top down. Our leaders are increasingly seen as malevolent. They don't have our best interests in mind precisely because they rule according to their own interests. And here's the key: as long as that gap, that alienation remains or even grows, distrust and disgust will continue to grow as well. So in many ways, when all's said and done, when it comes to calls for prosecution as well as vaccine hesitancy in many respects, we ain't seen nothing yet. And some significant news: meanwhile, the American public is looking at the consequences of Joe Biden's rule. And what they see is not good. They see social dissolution, they see an increasingly bad economy. It turns out that this was, in fact, the worst year in modern American history for the stock market. This was its worst years since 2008. The S&P 500 finished 2022 down 19.4%. There is no excuse for that, given the fact that we are out of the pandemic and have been out of the pandemic for quite a while right here. And all he had to do was sit by and shut up, and he didn't do any of that. And yet, he's going to continue forward with his big ambitions. The backlash is going to be extreme. Economists are predicting a recession. We're going to see some new tax events taking place because of Democratic legislation in the last Congress. As the Wall Street Journal points out, Happy New Year, or if you're in business, unhappy new tax year. American employers are getting hit in 2023 with a variety of tax increases, even as the risk of recession rises along with interest rates. The tax hikes arrived for two reasons: provisions of the 2017 GOP Tax Reform Act that are phasing out, and big tax increases that passed as part of the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act. So we thought we'd listen the unmentionables: capital expensing, the biggest business tax. What is the end of full immediate expensing for equipment? The 2017 tax reform spurred investment by letting businesses immediately deduct the full cost of hardware, like trucks and machines. But that policy is set to phase out. The maximum early deduction drops this year to 80%. It's going to continue to decrease now each year until it disappears in 2026. R&D expensing. That head has already arrived January 2020. To mark the end of full expensing from corporate research and development, a benefit that began in 1954. Companies could previously deduct the R&D spending from their next tax bill. Now they have to spread the deduction over several years. Interest expensing. The cap on the business interest deduction dropped last year when the formula changed to exclude amortization. This is justifiable as part of tax reform, because the tax code shouldn't have a subsidy for debt over equity. But the timing now is really bad. In other words, all of these taxes, including the new corporate minimum tax, the stock buyback tax, all of this is going to impact the economy in really negative ways. One of the reasons why big banks are now predicting a recession, and they're also expecting that the Fed is going to have to pivot. According to the Wall Street Journal, more than 2/3 of the economists at 23 large financial institutions that do business directly with the Federal Reserve are betting the United States will have a recession in 2023. 2 others are predicting recession in 2024. The firms known as primary dealers are a collection of trading firms and investment banks that include companies like Barclays Banks, Bank of America, TD Securities, and UBS. They cited a number of red flags: Americans are spending down their pandemic savings. The housing market is now in decline. Banks are tightening their lending standards. We expect a downturn in global GDP growth in 2020. Truth to light about recessions in both the US and the Eurozone. According to PNB Parabola, the main culprit is the Federal Reserve, which has been raising rates for months to try to slow the economy and curb inflation. So the economy is likely to get worse. This is not going to stop the spending binge that our Congress is currently on. According to a brand new study out of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, American fiscal policy is, quote, in permanent imbalance as current debt plus projected future spending outstrips future tax revenue, which means that the federal government budget is going to have to require, if we were to balance the books, a 30% spending cut, or a 40% increase in taxes, according to DailyWire.com. So things are likely to get worse. And Joe Biden, again, is not slowing down. He's going to continue to push this, and he's going to continue to enjoy his life. You'll notice that in the middle of the worst cold snap in decades in the United States, resulting in some actual deaths, Joe Biden was vacationing off in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and no one seemed to matter. It didn't matter the median care one iota. So when Ted Cruz in the middle of a cold snap in Texas goes down to Cancun with his family, this is a national scandal. How dare he leave his state? By the way, he's a federal senator who has virtually no impact on the running of the state when it comes to energy policy. But Ted Cruz, a really, really bad guy, the President of the United States, takes off in the middle of the worst cold snap in decades in the United States, where people are dying to go to a warm place for a week and sleep in the sun because he's grandpa, and that's totally fine. Eric Adams, by the way, did the exact same thing. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, he actually left New York in the middle of this cold snap. The mayor is the executive of the city, right? He's not a senator. He's the mayor. He left also for the U.S. Virgin Islands. His excuse was he missed his mom, who died a couple of years ago, is my understanding. So if I miss my grandfather, do I just get to go on random vacations and abdicate my duties? Now is that the way this was his excuse was I get the sense of entitlement from Democrats who feel that the winds of history are at their back is really, really strong. Here's Eric Adams over the course of the break, saying that he deserves his vacation. Everyone listen to this, he said. So after 365 days of commitment to the city, I decided to take 2 days to reflect on mommy. And to watch how you responded to my 2 days out of the city was really alarming. I deserve good work-life balance like you do. Better you went on a vacation. I bet you have not worked 365 days in the city. Okay folks, unbelievable. I mean, truly the level of self-absorption of the public officials is really an amazing, amazing thing. Okay. So as I've been saying the whole show, if this is the year of the backlash, if the backlash is coming, then that would require some sort of cohesiveness on the Republican side of the aisle. And here is where we run into a bit of trouble for backlash theory. And that is that the Republicans are really bad at this. Republicans are in fact quite capable of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And so they're now having an idiotic fight today over whether or not Kevin McCarthy ought to be Speaker of the House. This is a fight with no consequences for the American people. Just gonna put it out there. The American people don't care. They don't care one iota. The reason they don't care one iota is because with the Republicans holding a majority in the House, Joe Biden's legislative agenda ought to be DOA. That'd be dead on arrival. There's not going to be a lot of legislation that gets done over the course of the next couple of years. All the Republicans have to do is plant their feet and say no, it does not matter who the Speaker is in order to do any of that. And so the people who are holding out shouting at Kevin McCarthy, he can't be the Speaker because he's not committed enough. Then who else? I mean, well, the people who are like, oh, I love Kevin McCarthy. It's got to be him. Ken McCarthy's a nice guy. But why? The answer is the American people don't care. They don't care. So the answer is whoever has the votes should become a Speaker. McCarthy has the most votes, so you should probably become the Speaker. Right now. We have an idiot fast in which we have like 5 or 6 congresspeople are basically holding up the works for no gain. Like what exactly is the gain here? Gordon Wall Street Journal Republican leader Kevin McCarthy worked on Monday to lock down support to become House Speaker has been remained up in the air. Some conservative lawmakers threatened to turn Tuesday's leadership vote into the most unpredictable in a century. Well, totally useless. There's no reason for this. Whether you like McCarthy, whether you don't like McCarthy, it does not matter. As the Speaker of the House, his entire job is to just say no to Joe Biden. You could put a dog in that seat, a dog with a sign that says no, and he would essentially do the same thing. Is what the Speaker of the House is going to do. The Speaker vote is set for midday and comes after McCarthy spent the weekend scrambling to get the votes necessary from House Republicans to win the gavel. He acquiesced and requested rules change. It gives rank-and-file members more power, including making it easier to ask the Speaker, but a significant number of GOP lawmakers said they still remain opposed to the. California has been one of those people, as Representative Bob Good. He tried to explain why McCarthy was not going to get his vote. Why? Like, who's the alternative? If there's like a great alternative waiting in the wings? I'm waiting to hear it. Who has the support of the majority caucus? Because here are the alternatives right now. Either the Republicans just spend the next month voting over and over and over not for Kevin McCarthy, and then probably for Kevin McCarthy, because you have a bunch of Republicans in the House, some of whom I've talked to, who have said they're only voting for Kevin McCarthy just to stop this stuff. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Open Source News. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and turn on the